There's an old saying that, the farmer will always be the most important person, because you need the dentist once a year, the doctor maybe once a year. You need the farmer 3 times a day to put food on the table. And it's very important that we keep our beef sector positive and that we don't let it get so depleted that we can't regenerate it.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and as we recap on BEEF2026, which took place in Teagasc Grange on the 1st of July, I caught up with a number of attendees on the day to gather their thoughts in Teagasc Grange. I'm delighted to be joined by Alice Doyle, Deputy President. Alice, what are your thoughts here on today at BEEF2026?
A very good day, I have to say. From the time we came in the front gate, there was positive engagement all the way around at all the stands. And I noticed this year that a lot of people were standing, actually engaging at the stands more so than usual. In the past, I would have noticed a lot of people walk by, they look up at a stand and just move on. But there was actually active engagement at a lot of the stands this year, particularly around the whole area of economics, the economics of the beef farming, and how to make a few bob out and where to save and what you're doing. Again, also at the genetic side around the ICBF area, looking at the genetics of where we're going with beef and how it's going to be very important to concentrate on genetics when we're going into beef rearing. So I think the two sides, the picking of the right animal and the economics of how to make the best out of it, are the two areas I noticed that there seemed to be huge engagement. Having said that, there was engagement at nearly every single stand that I was at. The crowd is impressive. And I noticed a lot of younger people this year as well, which is good to see. So, we generally talk about generation renewal and the lack of interest in it and whatever. There would appear to be an interest now in beef, and it's a renewed interest, and it's good to see, because it was a sector, unfortunately, that wasn't highlighted for a long time and wasn't seen as an attractive sector. But because we've gone through a few good years now, and it's beginning to look that there could be profitability in beef again, it will be done differently than it was done in the past, and we will have more part-time farmers doing it. But a lot of the concentration, even on the stands, is around that, how we're going to have to meet that kind of a challenge going forward. And it's great to see that interest. And I know we had a great year last year, with beef. The prices were fantastic. We've gone through a bit of a slump again beginning of this year, but it's picked up even this week now, where the prices are back up a little bit again, which is encouraging. And hopefully we'll have to retain it, at definitely north of €7 in order to make it viable, and more if we could get it. But certainly we don't want it below the €7 if we can. The future of where beef is going, I think there is a good possibility that there is younger people are beginning to see there is a future in it. As I said, in a different way. It won't be done the way maybe my generation or the previous generation have done it. But then that's not progress if people don't change things. So I think there will be, food will always be needed. There's an old saying that, the farmer will always be the most important person, because you need the dentist once a year, the doctor maybe once a year. You need the farmer 3 times a day and to put food on the table. And I think that is, with that, the reality of that will come back again. And it's very important that we keep our beef sector positive and that we don't let it get so depleted that we can't regenerate it. And we were getting close to that in the last few years. But I think there is that positivity around the field today, positive engagement, positive chatting, and there's a good positive atmosphere among farmers, which I think is important.
I'm Vincent O'Reilly from Kingscourt there, and doing a bit of everything from dairy beef to sucklers to and just buying in store cattle. So kind of all making it. I have to say it's brilliant so far today now. So it is, at least the weather held up as well.
And what has been the highlight from the different stands you've seen today? What key things stood out for you?
Well, I think kind of from a lot of things, there's a lot of common sense in a way with the likes of the grassland management. I think is the take home message really. Growing grass with wire kind of would be what I'd be kind of most inclined to focus on at home and try and reduce your fixed costs and that. So kind of that's my most impressive thing that I've seen so far today.
And from what you've seen today, what do you think you'll implement on your farm going forward? Maybe it's something new or something different?
I'd probably take home the likes of growing your grass and moving your cattle a bit quicker, trying to graze the paddocks out better and implementing a better system kind of, and try and reduce the meal and that.
I'm joined here by John O'Connor. John, what's your thoughts on today?
Catherine, no, it was a very enjoyable day. Picked up a lot of different information. Overall, all the different technical parts of the thing. What I really enjoyed was the grass, the good quality grass, the quality cattle. I suppose one message, breeding is very important. So that basically, breeding the right animal leaves you more money.
And what was the key highlight from the day today?
From the day today, the key highlight would be, I suppose, grassland management, breeding, or calving under 24 months, which I do. Basically, it brings you up, keep you on date what you're doing yourself at home. That's what the highlight was.
I'm delighted to be joined by Kevin Hanarahan here, Head Rural Economist with Teagasc. Kevin, what's your thoughts on today here at BEEF 2026?
A really enjoyable day, a day at which I learned lots, and it was great to see a really good crowd here of all ages. And I particularly noticed lots of young people engaging with Teagasc staff about things that can make their life and the life of their successors better in terms of their beef farming operation. So that was the real highlight for me. And also some of the old messages about calf per cow per year and finishing cattle earlier and putting cows in calf as early as possible, 24 months. All these old messages that can make a big difference if implemented well on farms across the country.
What's the outlook for beef in the weeks and months ahead?
I think what we heard today from the industry folks here and from Joe Burke from Bord Bia was that the outlook is actually positive. Prices are going up at the moment for finished cattle and they're still quite strong for younger cattle. We probably won't hit the heights we hit in 2025, but the price level is much healthier than it was 2 or 3 years ago. So I think the outlook is still quite positive. And I think that the positive air we've had from most of the folks, everybody I met here today was positive about the future for beef farming. I think that's supported by the realities out there in the marketplace. We could all imagine that we'd love if we had a €8 per kilo price. We're not at that point and we probably won't get there. But I think we need to find a sweet spot where prices are sufficient to return a viable profit for farmers, but also keep European and Irish consumers eating Irish beef. Because without those consumers, we're going to be nowhere. So I think we need to find that sweet spot where everybody along the supply chain, from the suckler farmer to the finisher to the factory man, can make a living.
I'm joined here by Breifne O'Brien from Agriland. Breifne, what's your thoughts on the day?
Yeah, Catherine. So look, I've been here obviously several years as a biannual event, and it's interesting sometimes just to come back and take stock, of where we are now versus 2 years ago. Obviously, a lot has changed there from price perspective and a few other issues as well. But it was interesting, I suppose, here today to see highlighted, stuff that's really topical at the moment. A lot of farms are finding time pressure as a big issue, on their farms, and there was, labour management, time management strategies highlighted there today. Simple, practical things, that doesn't maybe necessarily involve significant expense that can be adopted on farms at home. I suppose another thing I seen as well, there was definitely a lot of cattle on display today, both suckler and dairy beef, different types of systems, different types of genetics, showcasing the role that genetics has and then the role of different nutritional systems as well. Some of the research there as well on different feeding strategies for dairy beef animals, found that to be particularly interesting. And then, of course, just a day out, networking, meeting everybody across the industry, from farmers the whole way through to industry professionals. It was a really enjoyable day out, Catherine.
And what was the key highlight for you today, Breifne?
Yeah, so I suppose, look, it was a great opportunity today to get chairing in the Beef Pulse arena, the panel on driving sustainable dairy beef production going forward. We had 5 really interesting panelists, and I suppose it was interesting to hear from the different perspectives, what they're going to be doing, and what their messages were on the theme of today's event, which was driving sustainable performance. So look, I'm sure all that information will be available on the Teagasc website over the coming days, no more than it'll be available on Agriland also.
I'm delighted to be joined here at BEEF 2026 with Adam Woods, editor of the Irish Farmers Journal. Adam, what's your thoughts on BEEF 2026 here today?
Huge congratulations to Teagasc, Catherine. Another great day. Speaking to some farmers from England, actually going out the gate there, and they were saying they don't have a facility like this in England, and they don't have an organisation like this in terms of independence. A lot of the advice over there is given by companies. So we're very lucky in this country as regards that we have Teagasc and we have a facility like this that's independent research, and that's really, really important that we never lose that. So some key messages from the day for me. It goes back to grass. There's no magic pill here. There's no magic, we'll say, wheel. It goes back to grass. It goes back to genetics. I suppose some of the differences for me, showing the difference between, implementing all the technologies and implementing none. The huge, I think it was 25, 30,000 between the top farm and the bottom farm, and that's absolutely huge. And that's only on 30 or 40 cows. So that's the key message for me. Obviously, in with our Farm Tech Talk, we really enjoyed that. I got good engagement from the panel, and speaking to farmers after, they enjoyed that as well. So yeah, we had the full Livestock team out here today. All the news and views, it'll be up on farmersjournal.ie. Obviously, Farm Tech Talks goes out at the weekend, and next week's paper as well. We'll have full coverage on everything that happened here.
That's great, Adam. What was the key highlight for you today?
I suppose in terms of the Teagasc changing maybe back and maybe changing tack a little bit, I think that's a good thing as regards looking at labour, and maybe labour being a limiting factor on farms as opposed to driving profitability and driving output. I know a lot of part-time farmers in the West which they don't want to go to 2 livestock units a hectare. They want to manage it with a family, they want to manage it with a job, and they want to manage that as part of, I suppose, the farm system or the farm life. And that's important for Teagasc to focus in on that as regards how you streamline things with facilities, how you streamline things with paddocks, and how you become relevant to those part-time farmers as well as the full-time farmers. So I think that's a really important line to go down.
I'm delighted to be joined at BEEF2026 by Joe Burke from Bord Bia. Joe, what was your thoughts on today?
Really interesting day. I suppose a couple of the kind of key take-home, impressions anyway that I got were certainly very positive. And that even though obviously cattle prices so far this year have been, unfortunately in decline for most of it, we're in a different environment anyway than we have been, I suppose, certainly looking back 2 years ago when we last were here in Grange at the National Beef Open Day. Farmers were really keen to look at the technologies and look at some of the management practices in order to make best use of this. Look, beef prices, thankfully, are, north of $6.50 a kilo and rising fairly rapidly, I would say, because the beef kill last week was only 24,000. And definitely we're seeing a stronger demand for our products. So, against that backdrop, certainly farmers looking to see how can they, make the best possible use of grass, get the best performance from their cattle, look at genetics, look at, all of those different factors that hopefully will make their farm more financially sustainable, as well as sustainable in other ways. So, we were looking and concentrating a bit more on the finished product as well. We had, along with us in the Bord Bia little stand, we had the Association of Craft Butchers of Ireland, who were demonstrating some of the different cuts and talking about the difference between the different processing techniques, dry aging versus vacuum packing or wet aging as it's known. And I suppose tasting the different steaks as well in terms of, what difference does that make to the tenderness and to the flavour. So it's just an aspect that farmers mightn't necessarily always think about, even though it's very relevant when we think about Irish beef won 2 of the best steaks in the world steak competition last year in the Netherlands. So to get those awards, and great to see those, it enhances our reputation in the same way that having a really good grass-based production system is really good for marketing. These are kind of our USPs, if you like, we produce a super product and one that we should be proud of, and that we must continue to market to, the highest returning channels and customers internationally.
That's great, Joe. What's the outlook for beef in the weeks and months ahead?
It's a good question. Certainly we're in a period right now in terms of the coming weeks of, I would say, strong momentum, scarce supply. Animals were kind of late going to grass, and that the initial kind of performance of cattle at grass in some instances has been a bit slower than last year. So we would expect the next 4 to 6 weeks to be very tight in terms of cattle kill. Last week was only 24,000, as I touched on there. So, it may not be just remain as tight as that. The weather was very good last week and it would have allowed farmers to get, jobs done on the farm and everything like that. But certainly close to home, we would see tight supplies in the UK as well. Hopefully that will result in, good, strong upward momentum. Looking forward, overall, after that, there's no outlook to any big, recovery in terms of supply after that either. We would expect the overall kill for the year to be, around similar or maybe slightly lower than last year overall. And European demand we would expect to, be a little bit stronger. We've seen the steak cuts especially perform well over the last few weeks, and that's part of the reason that we're seeing this recovery, that, the value of your steak cuts, your strip loin, your ribeye, your fillet, they have increased well in the last few weeks. We would be just hoping that the 4-quarter cuts as well would start to hopefully see some more of that recovery, see a bit of an improvement in price as well over the coming months.
I'm delighted to be joined here at BEEF 2026 with the Director of Teagasc, Professor Frank O Meara. Frank, what were your thoughts on today?
Look, very pleased with the event. I think we had a very good event organised for people, and people turned up in large numbers, and that's always, very important after putting in all the work. I think, look, there were loads of messages out there for farmers. I think the overriding message I take away is that there's a great future in beef. Beef can be a very profitable business, obviously very dependent on markets and prices, but so too is it dependent on how well farmers can do things on their farms, and the technologies that we talked about here, whether it's breeding or grassland management or animal health or winter nutrition, they all make a huge difference at the bottom line. And there's a lot of I suppose things that people can do on their farms, and we're there to help people do that, and that will all contribute to better bottom lines for people. So I'd be very positive about the day, and I think there's a great air of positivity about, and if we can get people to build on those technologies on their farms, I think they'll see the results in their bottom lines in the future.
That's all for this BEEF 2026 episode, and my thanks to everyone that joined me on the show and attended BEEF 2026. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.